Hey guys, Ben with Ben's Viewfinder here, and we are here to talk about lightning photography today. I've had a lot of people approach me about the subject and ask me how I've captured some of the shots I've gotten, and recently we had a big tragedy here in Arkansas, where I'm living currently, where a lot of people have passed away due to storms, and I was actually out chasing the system, and I felt like it inspired me to really put together a little bit of a blog and talk to you guys a little bit about how I do this and some of the ground rules I'd recommend for if you're interested in taking it up. So I'm just showing you a shot here that I took over in Savannah a couple years ago, and I'm just going to kind of leave this up while I talk about some of what I call the ground rules, or things you need to consider before you even get into the technical aspect of whether or not you should shoot, or if you're going to go shoot. So the thing that I want to stress, because it's very much a safety game, some of the most experienced and some of the best storm chasers in the world have been killed chasing storms. Even the most knowledgeable ones. The one that comes to mind most recently is a gentleman named Tim Samaras, and if you look him up, he is one of the most beloved people in storm chasing. He is very renowned for his amazing expertise and his knowledge of how storms work, and honestly, his caution and he was never that reckless, and he passed away chasing storms. And so he's the perfect example, a sad but perfect example of why you should take a lot of caution when you look into doing something like this. And you should understand that every time you go out and chase a storm, even if you don't think it's going to be that severe, it's a risk of danger, and you should understand that. So I'm just going to go over some ground rules. My first rule is going to be to never chase alone unless you're super experienced. I still don't like to chase by myself. And the system that just came through Arkansas the other day, I actually went out and chased and bailed on it. After I gotten out to location, I got to basically where the frontal boundary of this storm was, and I saw how it was setting up, and I saw what I was looking at, and I knew that I was not in a safe place. I knew that it wasn't going to be good conditions for chasing by myself, and I skipped out. I left, and I called my wife on my way home, and I was like, not going to happen tonight. I was like, maybe I'll chase it later, but this is just too scary. And about 15 minutes after I said that, a tornado rolled right over the area where I had been set up to take photographs. So, and it wasn't a small tornado, it was an EF4, so it would have killed me for sure. Um, so usually it's great to have someone with you. I'm going to move on to another photo. That way this is changing because I want to talk to you, but I'll keep you visually entertained here. And we'll move on to a shot that I took here in Arkansas. And it's just better safe than sorry is usually the rule of thumb. If it's going to be a huge severe system, you know it's going to be high risk. You're usually better safe than sorry, and especially if you don't have someone to go with you, it's best to just say, you know what, I'll get another system another day. But having someone with you is usually a great idea. Someone who understands how to read radar, someone who understands how to read velocity meters on a radar, understanding where hooks are, and understanding how tornadic activity happens, or even someone who understands how to read how the front's moving, so that if you set up and start taking photographs of lightning, if that's what you're after, understands that the lightning's getting too close. So in general, my rule is that I try to chase high electricity storms because I want to capture lightning. I'm not as interested in capturing tornadoes. And I'll usually chase high electricity storms if they're high tornado producing storms, or fronts that are producing a lot of tornadoes. I just tend to avoid them altogether and say I'll get another system, because lightning is a lot more common than tornadoes, and you can get a lot of systems that produce great lightning without that are not considered tornadic systems. So really learn how to read those and look for those. Another rule is usually when you go to chase storms, or when you go to photograph this stuff, is to create distance. Find out where your frontal boundary is. Find out where it's going to. Find out where the system's going to. So usually where I live, systems move northeast. Not saying that's how it's going to work where you live, and that's not always how it works where I live. But usually systems are moving northeast, so I'll set up northeast of the system. I'll get a good distance. I'll find a nice open area. That's another rule, is looking for a large field of view. You want open fields, lots of field of view, and I'll get set up, and I'll wait for the system to come to me a little bit. Because if you get too close, a lot of times systems are pretty fast moving. And so like the other night, those systems that were dropping all those tornadoes here were moving at 60 miles an hour. which is way too fast to keep up with. And that system will come through and drop a tornado on you and kill you without you even being able to react. And you think you can get in your car and run away, and you're not going to have time to do that. So make sure you have a field of view. Make sure you create distance, because that'll allow you to see things as they're coming in. And it'll be able to tell you if things are coming in fast. So avoid mountains, avoid trees, avoid closed-in areas or places where you can't tell what's going on around you. So the other thing to do is, if you're driving, especially a lot of these times, let me see what my next photo here is. We'll go ahead and move on. This is another photo done here. Actually, this was near my house, just out in the neighborhood here, and I really like this photo. But another thing to understand is to have an escape plan. If you're chasing in some of these back roads areas, make sure you understand where the nearest paved road is. Make sure you understand where the nearest highway is to get you north and south, to get you east and west. Especially some of these systems that have torrential rains in them. If you get off road, if you get onto some of these dirt roads and these systems come in, you will get stuck. It does. I drive a big Jeep Rubicon with four-wheel drive and serious tires on it, and I still avoid dirt roads unless I am very comfortable. If I don't feel like it's too bad of a system, if I'm not too worried about it, then I'll go on dirt roads. But if it has any sort of severity to it at all, I will only stick to pavement, or I will stick very close to pavement. So have an escape plan. The other thing is, speaking of your vehicles, is to stay near them. Even if you're going to go chase, even if you're going to go to these places and go out in the middle of nowhere, when you get out of your vehicle to take photos, stay near it. Find places that are near your vehicle. That way, if you need to get out, you can get out, and you can get out in a hurry. Sometimes being in your vehicle is not always the best plan. I should note that if a tornado was to drop on top of you, being in your vehicle is not a great idea. I've been told that getting down in ditches is a better plan than being in a vehicle. You should look to find out what most people recommend in your area for the best safety plans. I don't want to be the person to tell you what you should or shouldn't do as far as safety is considered in those situations, but I will tell you that being near your vehicle to be able to escape is a great idea, or having an escape plan in general is a very great idea. Which leads to understanding storms, understanding meteorology, and understanding weather in general. Even though I am not a meteorologist and I chase these storms, I spent a lot of time studying it and watching weather and reading blogs and learning how systems work a little bit and understanding how to read a radar. This is important information to me to know when I'm out chasing storms, so at least just to minimize my risk a little bit. Now, the other thing I use to help minimize my risk is apps. Nowadays, everybody's on a smartphone or they have a tablet with cellular capabilities, so get some apps. There's a million of them out there. Obviously, your basic free one is the Weather Channel app. That'll usually give you a half-decent radar, pretty up-to-date. It'll give you local conditions. It'll give you warnings if there are any. Another app I use is called Lightning Finder, which is not a free app, but it helps you track lightning strikes, how frequent they are, how soon they've happened. So that's a good one to use. Changing photos. Again, this is one I took over New Orleans. Another app to use is called Radar Scope, which is a very up-to-date, like to the minute radar, and has multiple levels. You can view precipitation sweeps, you can view velocity sweeps, everything you can think of on that one. So it's a very good app to use. Again, it's not free, but it's very good to use, and that allows you to use local radars, which is really nice too, because then you know you're getting up-to-date information. And then most places, like my local TV station here in town, has their own app too, which has a radar on it, which has warnings on it, and so I can use that too to help keep me up to date on what's going on. And the last couple of rules I'll get in before I tell you some specifics on what I use to shoot some of these is, one, to let someone know that you're chasing. If you're going to go out by yourself, if you feel comfortable and you go, I know storms, I've been doing this for enough time or whatever, even after all that, anytime I leave to chase storms, anytime I leave to go after lightning, I let my wife know I'm going out. I let her know the general area that I'm chasing. Just to say, you don't, not to worry about anything, but just so you know, I'm going out, I'm going to go take some photographs, I'm going to go chase after these storms, whatever. And she doesn't take it as a bad thing, but she knows that if she doesn't hear from me in a few hours or something is going on, then she knows, maybe to check in and ask, how things are going or whatever. So let someone know. The last thing is to know your seasons, to know this helps not necessarily as a safety thing. I mean, it does too, but because there are tornado seasons, hurricane seasons, things like that. But knowing when the most severe weather, when the highest producing lightning times of the year are, really helps you to get you in good positions, or knowing the geological locations of those areas too. Like obviously knowing to be in Oklahoma and Kansas and things like that during spring months, May and stuff like that is really good for tornadoes or whatever. You just got to know where to be to find the best stuff. There's some places they call lightning capitals. Tampa, Florida is very famous for their lightning. So you never just look around to make sure you understand stuff. So what we'll do now is we'll move on to the next photo here, which I have no idea what they are. This is another one I did in Savannah, and we're going to talk a little bit about rules and how to shoot some of these photographs. And I don't know what I did on this. This night I was in Savannah. This was a very high lightning producing storm, and I was lucky enough. I actually didn't plan to go after this. This was pure luck on the fact that my wife knows me, and she knows that I love shooting photography, and she knows I love storms. And I was actually asleep when this storm system rolled in. We were in Savannah on our anniversary, and this shot and this one, which is probably one of my most favorite or famous shots of lightning that people have seen of mine, were both shot there on that night, and they're completely thanks to my wife. This had nothing to do with experience or knowledge or anything else. This had to do with my wife waking me up on our anniversary trip and going, "Honey, there's a storm rolling in. You might want to take some pictures." And so I got up, I loaded up my crop, and I walked down to the river. I got rained on a whole bunch, and we waited under an awning for the system to pass a little bit. And then afterwards, it started dropping lightning over the bridge like you wouldn't believe, and it was beautiful, and it was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my entire life. And I owe it all to my wife. So sometimes it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have. It's having a good wife or some luck that rolls in on your side. So let's see where we were right here. This is another shot, just some different type of lightning here. This is cloud to cloud lightning instead of cloud to ground lightning. And I don't have a lot of shots on my portfolio. A lot of people notice that. A lot of people ask where all my shots are. I have probably a couple of hundred shots of lightning. I just don't publish them. I don't feel that lightning shots come out very good. Just because I capture lightning doesn't mean that I'm interested in producing it. So I've only produced a few of them and actually published a few of them because they're the ones that I really like. So maybe I'll release more later. And as I go along, I'm always shooting. I'm always chasing after storms. But what you have to understand about shooting lightning is that it is a 1 in 1,000 type thing. You'll go out and you'll take a million pictures and you'll hope for the best, and you'll occasionally catch a really nice shot. Catching this shot is luck for the most part. I mean, it's not, you don't control lightning, you don't control Mother Nature. You're going to go out and you're going to chase storm after storm after storm. You're going to get set up over and over and over again, and you're going to miss a lot. You're going to take a lot of blank frames. You're going to miss a lot of systems. You're going to get rained on a lot. It's a very frustrating medium of photography to go after. But when you capture when you capture what you're looking at, this to me is mind-boggling. I was giggling the night I captured this night, and I hit play on the back of my I shot this with a D7000, I think. I did. And the night I shot this, I remember hitting play on the back of the frame. I'm standing next to the river, and I was just so giddy. I was so excited that this is what fell through the frame that I couldn't even tell you. And that's the thing that's so rewarding about lightning photography, is that when you do get it, it is amazing, because getting this type of shot is not easy to do. And if you go to Google Images, you can Google image the Eiffel Tower and find a million beautiful photos of the Eiffel Tower. But finding those truly spectacular images of lightning are not that common, especially in locations. Like in this case where it fell over this beautiful bridge in Savannah, it's not a common thing. So if you can do this and you can find these locations and you can shoot lightning in these great places, you're going to have unique photographs, which is what every photographer wants to have. So, all right. So we're going to talk about some of the technicalities of this, and we'll see right here. I shot this with the D7000. I shot this at f16. This was a 3.6 second exposure time, which you'll notice, you'll go, well, there's no such thing as a 3.6 second exposure time. Well, that's because I was using a remote shutter release, which is always a great idea to have one of those. It's basically, if you don't know what a remote shutter is, it's something that hooks up to your camera. Either the one I was using on my D7000 was wireless, the one I use on my D3X is wired, and it's basically just connects to the camera, and you push and hold a button down, and as long as you hold the button down, or if you've looked on your exposure, if you mess with your exposure dial on your camera and go to bulb, It's the same type of idea. If you go to bulb and hold down your shutter button, it'll stay open as long as you hold the shutter button. Well, a remote shutter release is the same idea. It uses that bulb setting to allow you to hold the shutter open. So in really dark situations, like when you're out in the middle of the night shooting lightning, it allows you to keep your shutter open, allows you to wait for that lightning to drop before you close the shutter and capture it. But I guess I should say that obviously the longer your exposure, the more noise you're going to have. So you got to be careful. You can't do 5-minute exposures with flashes of lightning going off all over the place. You'll start getting some problems or whatever. So usually, I can't say this is the rule. It really depends on the lighting situation. Like obviously this situation where I was in a city, there were some street lights and stuff like that. So anything over like a 45-second to a minute exposure probably would have started blowing out these lights really, really badly. So I wouldn't have done more than that. If you get really back in the country, some places you can do, even a couple of minutes. But part of that depends on the ambient lightning too. Just because you're not getting bolts doesn't mean that you're not getting some flashes and stuff like that, which counts as light on your sensors. So really, it's kind of a go engage type of situation. Let's see what I'm at here. The other thing I talked about is I guess it kind of depends. You can shoot a really low f-stop if you need to because you're shooting at infinity most of the time. But I usually shoot at f8 or above, and especially since it's usually a light sensitive thing and being able to keep your shutter open longer is a good thing. I tend to run at f8 or above. I usually run at f13 or above. It really depends. I usually like to shoot with city lights or something or some sort of composition involved other than just a field. So I'll run some different exposure or some different f-stops. Obviously, you need a tripod. I guess that one's a pretty simple one to explain. You're not going to be able to hold your camera still for these type of exposures, so you have to set it up on a tripod. Having sandbags or having a very stable tripod is important because most of the time when you're chasing storms, it is very windy. And that'll, even if you have your camera set up on a tripod, it'll start shaking the tripod due to the wind. And that'll cause things like the details here in this bridge to become fuzzy. So you want to have those nice and still for you. The last couple of things I'm going to tell you about are, don't forget about composition. And don't forget, this is a good example. This is one I just took recently here. And when I set this up, I actually noticed that there was traffic going by this road. I noticed that the front was going over this side here. This was off to my southwest. And I happened to be driving down this road, and I noticed kind of the angle this was pointing at. And I pulled into this, off to this side road, and there was, across this little water bridge here that you see here, this ditch here, there's a field off to my left that is a farm of some sort. I don't know what they farm, probably rice or something. There was one of every now and then on these little farm roads, you'll have these accesses, which are just like little land bridges that go right over the little ditches here, the irrigations. And I parked right on that, and I set my camera up. I'm literally standing with my back probably against my Jeep because the wind was blowing in very hard from behind me. And so I used my Jeep as a wind block for my tripod to allow, so that way my tripod's even more stable. I pointed it to my west-southwest here, and I put some land on the bottom third of the frame here, so that we had a little bit of a composition, but yet I still had some of the sky coming through. Lightning is one of those things that's kind of hard to gauge. You don't obviously know if it's going to drop way off in the distance on the horizon or if it's going to drop across your whole frame and fall on this field right across the road from you. It's kind of one of those things. So I set it up like this, and it happened to work out pretty well for me. And I knew that there was cars occasionally coming through, so I wanted to set it up so that I could maybe get some of these light trails going across because I knew I was doing long exposures. Let's see what we got here on this one. This was probably this is a 30-second exposure. My lightning trigger, my remote shutter release actually wasn't working, so I was just doing 30-second exposures this night. And shot at f16 again. This was with my D3X at 100 ISO. And so I set it up and happened to just get lucky. I got the lightning to drop and I got the car lights to go by. Now, my wife called me literally while I was shooting these and said, there's a bunch of tornadoes on the ground. You need to basically get out of there. The local weather place was saying, that it was getting bad and I needed to bail, and so I did. I stuck around for a couple more minutes, shot some, just let out a couple more frames, then basically bailed and went home. So you gotta know when to go. But So this is really the sole image I got from the other night. I had gone out, shot, or got set up, realized it was too scary to chase on my own, bailed, went home, saw that the initial system had passed and I had stopped dropping tornadoes, went back out, set this up, got this image, and then my wife called me and said it started dropping tornadoes again. So I packed up and went back home, and this was the only frame that I caught from the night. But honestly, that makes it a successful night, because when you're chasing storms, you never, you can't expect to really end up that well, and you're rarely ever going to get a really good keeper of a photo. So the fact that I managed to get a decent shot from that night makes me pretty happy. So the thing I just mentioned a second ago, and the last thing that you may want to consider investing in, is what's called a lightning trigger. Now, what a lightning trigger is instead of using a remote shutter release and setting up your camera and holding down your shutter and just leaving it open and hoping you're going to capture some lightning, this is kind of like a motion detection type thing, only it uses light. It sits on your camera, and when these bolts of lightning that you're looking at here were to drop, it would tell, like within a hundredth of a second or something, apparently it's very good, will tell your shutter to open and capture that lightning, and then it'll close afterwards. And so that way you don't get the noise problems, you don't get these other issues. Now, I've never used a remote shutter release. I guess it's kind of, even though I'm not a hunter, some people would say it takes the game out of the hunt, And so I like using manual releases. I like trying to set up and capture it. It adds to the thrill of it when I actually do it. I've considered investing in one, and I probably will eventually invest in a lightning trigger just to try them out, or maybe set up multiple systems, maybe point some systems in some different directions. Because a lot of times when you set up here, like in this case, I set this frame up that you're looking at, and there was lightning going off all around me. There was great bolts going off to my right, there was great bolts going off to my left, and I would have never caught those because of the way I had my frame set up. So, I don't know, lightning trigger would have been nice, maybe set up a second frame. But really, guys, lightning is just kind of it's a tough thing to do, but it's a rewarding thing to do. And so if you're interested in looking into doing it, remember that safety is the most important thing to remember. Do a lot of studying. Find somebody to go with you who's willing to learn the weather, who's willing to watch radars for you. In my case, I happen to have a lovely wife who's willing to do it for me. But it's never worth it to take a picture and die for it. So really, discretion is a better part of valor here. So I hope you guys got a little bit of information, and if you have any questions about lightning photography, then feel free to ask, and I'll do what I can to answer your questions. I know this wasn't the most exciting video to watch. I just figured I'd show you a few frames of lightning that I captured and talk about them and tell you about some of my stuff that I look after. So it's ended up being a pretty long video, but like I said, if you have any questions, ask, and I'll do what I can to answer. Thanks for joining in, guys, and have a good day.